don't remember how many years ago it was now, but we were using the first edition of Sandy's text in our psychology classes. And I'd gotten the text from one of my colleagues who says, hey, you need to take a look at this. And so started using the text in my classes. And one of the things that really struck me about Sandy's book from the very beginning was the focus on assessment. The fact that you had a textbook that was tied to the APA learning outcomes for undergrads. You also had the section quizzes, you had the exams at the end of the chapter, had concept maps, just a lot of different ways that students could assess their learning. And so that was what I got really excited about in the very beginning, but most importantly was also Sandy's way of having a conversation with the student. She didn't talk down to them in any form or fashion. She talked about the science of psychology, much like I try to do in the classroom, is by having a conversation with the student. And so another thing that was really important for me was my psych lab. Students are only going to be able to do what they have time to do, and they need to be able to see the value in what they're doing. So my psych lab gave me a way that I could help students find ways, and I would structure ways for students to assess their learning, and then I would use that feedback in the classroom by the way that I approach the material. So over the years, we don't have my psych lab as our foundation, we have Revel, and Revel has improved that ability for students to get not only flexibility and being able to get to the text, but also be able to test their understanding as they're going through it. And they're able to do so on their phone, on their tablet, or on a computer, and they can do so anytime or anywhere that's convenient. So Revel not only gives them what we used to have as the standalone text, but it also provides them technology that they can assess their learning and have portability and a very mobile device or platform. It's been quite some time thinking back, when I first joined Sandy on that second edition, and now we've just released Exploration 5e, and aspects of the text that continue to be vital is the focus on assessment, the tie into the APA learning outcomes for undergrads. The student voice that comes through, like the student voice questions. Those are actually questions that come from students either in Sandy's classroom or my classroom. But also the changes that we've been able to do over the years. Like if you were to go back to the very first edition's concept maps, and then you look at the concept maps that came about in 2E, then later, each of the editions over the time that I've been involved with Sandy, those have continued to develop. The assessments that we use, I think we do a better job of helping students understand what it is that they know about psychology, that they can understand not only some of the content, but also how to apply that psychology, how to apply that science of psychology to their everyday life. Other things that have been very important for us over time is the move to Revel. Sandy and I have spent a lot of time thinking about how students can actually do things related to psychology, not just reading about them, but how can they test their understanding, assess their learning, but also do things related to the different concepts that we're talking about so they can make those connections and make the connections to their everyday life. The tie-in on critical thinking, we have special features that focus on learning outcome 2 of the APA learning goals on critical thinking, because that's so vital for all of us in our day-to-day life. Another thing that's changed is definitely the incorporation of Revel being a mobile app. Students now can access the text, their quizzes, their learning activities right there on their phone, on their tablet, on their computer, whenever it's convenient for them, and they can do so most anywhere. We were actually able to go to colleges on the West Coast. We went to colleges on the East Coast. We have students from 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges. We actually have some students from their master's programs, and we asked them very specific questions about psychology and how it relates to their everyday life. So the videos at the end of every chapter, those applied psychology features that have been associated with our text for some time, now have that student voice, that student experience and they're talking about how not only psychology and the focus topics relate to their everyday life. For example, in learning, we have a question, what are some examples of conditioning in day-to-day life? And students talk about, what it's like to get notifications. What does it mean if they don't get notifications? What if everybody's getting notification or text messages and you're not? And can actually apply some of those learning principles about why it is that we engage in certain behaviors more frequently than others. The applying psychology into everyday life videos with the students were a lot of fun because all we did was give them a prompt, and all the responses are the actual students' responses. It's not what we wrote, it's their voice, it's their actual responses. So some other examples that I can remember, like for example, how do we use our senses to be more mindful? How do we recognize cognitive biases? In the personality chapter, how do we informally assess the personality of others? So across all these applying psychology to everyday life videos, you've got students from 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, and even a few from their master's programs responding to how they use psychology in their everyday life, which was very cool that we actually have the students responding how they use it. As far as my own classes, I've used these videos and I've highlighted for them that these were other students that were responding. And so it has been useful not only in them to hear from students from different parts of the country, but it's also been helpful for prompting further discussions in the class. This has been a very demanding time for all of us. Changes that have happened on our campuses, for our students, in our own homes, in our own communities. Thank you for taking a few moments to learn a little bit more about our title.